The behavior of some Barbadian students has become a major concern and is having a negative impact on our society. There have been calls for officials to actively address the issue and implement strategies to curb this behavior, which has become so prevalent. On this episode of In Focus, we will examine this matter, which is impacting and undermining the well-being of our communities. Today, we are honored to have with us a diverse panel offering powerful perspectives on the issue at hand. Dr. Ian Marshall, educational consultant and lecturer in educational leadership, Sharon-Rose Gittens, president of the Barbados Association of Professional Social Workers, and Omari Cheltenham, psychology student at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. A warm welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, before we dive right into the matter, I would like each of you to just give us a brief introduction, give the audience a chance to get to know you before we start. Let's start with you, Sharon.
Yeah,
Ladies first.
Ladies first. And I want to say it's really great to be here, to be back with you after so many years, to be back. I am not only the president of the Social Work Association. Within the association, we have school social workers. We are a number of persons who have definitely been out there, who are in the field, working as relates to social work, but also very diverse as relates to what and how we do. So to the audience watching and listening, it should be pretty focused in terms of how we look and pull apart the topic.
Okay. Omari?
Well, first of all, I would like to say it's an honor to be here with so many extraordinary minds. And yes, my name is Omari Cheltenham. I'm a second year UWI student studying psychology, but I'm also a male youth advocate. I was also the former vice president of the Barbados National Students Council, and I like to play volleyball and play video games.
Okay, that's good. Dr. Marshall, good night.
Okay, good night, and thank you for having me. I am an educational consultant. As you said, my area and my passion really is educational leadership, and I am I'm concerned in a very deep way about what is happening in our schools. So I thank you for the opportunity for being here, to be able to share a few tidbits of knowledge if it can help in any way. Thank you again.
Okay, well, I'm very grateful to have each of you here. And Dr. Marshall, you just mentioned your deep concern, so we're going to start with you. We've been seeing some erratic behavior. It's been blasting all over social media. We've been talking about it in households. Can you describe this for us? Tell us more about this, what we're seeing.
I think what we are seeing in schools now is essentially the accumulation of a series of changes that have been taking place in the society. And it did not start yesterday, but I'm saying this process started, I would say, about 25 years ago. And I say 25 years as a marker because when you think about how things progress, and you think about the current crop of students that we have now and what we are seeing, it is in stark contrast to what existed 25 years ago. And I think there are many reasons why we have come to this place, but I think the main one is the influence of social media and the influence of technology. Not necessarily that is necessarily a bad thing, but I think those two factors, because have created a situation where you're now having school live and in living color. So years ago, something would happen at school and it would take time for you to get home and report it to your parents, etc. No, the things are happening live and they're being beamed live to the world. And as a result, you're getting the impact now, all the attendant problems associated with these things going viral, so to speak. So to my mind, that is one of the major reasons why we are seeing this change in behavior, but there are several others that I will delve into at a later stage.
I know some people would say, oh, well, we had this behavior when we were younger. The only difference is now that everybody has a phone. That's not really an excuse for it, though, is it?
No, not at all. I think what the access to the technology has done is that it has now amplified the problem. So if you were, I'll give you an example of what I speak. You will see, for example, a fight is going on in a school compound. That fight is being to all over the world, and then the parents get involved without understanding the context. So by the time it gets back to the school and they're seeking to address it, The challenge is that there are so many other publics that are weighing on this issue, so it makes it extremely difficult for the school to grapple with all the publics who are weighing in and saying this ought to be done and that ought to be done, not understanding the context in which the incident took place. So that's,
Can we build on that? As we usually say, school is a microcosm of our society. So yes, the technology now and the digital platforms are there. But when we look at try to examine the behavior really as a flower, that's just what we see. But there's a root, there's a stem, there are branches that we need to get to. So from the social worker's perspective, as we are those planted in schools, then there are those behaviors that we see not grounded on social media, not just because there's this platform to push it, but clearly there are other things happening at home, in the community, and also with the families. So I just wanted to support, as you've shared, you know, as yes, this particular area, not just looking at it as a flower by itself. There's a root cause to all of it.
Omari, from a younger perspective.
I would say that yes, it's social media, but it's also media in general. Because social media is our WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, but then media is on a larger perspective. We have overseas media also infiltrating Barbadian media, and our youth are heavily involved in media outside of Barbados, and that would influence their behavior patterns. Because you have your education system here and what you're taught at school, but then you're also getting bits from overseas and other directions, so it's information overload. Where can I put my focus? Where should I focus? And sometimes it might not be in the best direction, the best focus in general.
And it begs the question, where are the parents? What's
Exactly.
happening with the parents that provided this particular child or young adult, depending on the age, the device, and what's happening in terms of monitoring that child on the device?
When we were younger, I would say, I had my grandmother who was at home while my parents were at work. But no, we don't really have that system as much in Barbados. The parents are at work, our parents are busy, some parents are at home working online or doing other things. So we kind of use the tablets, the phones, the devices as a cushion, a support system outside of what we can do. And I think that that's maybe then how the children are becoming so engrossed, and then parents are not paying as much attention to it as possible.
Correct, and we would, being in the middle of our psychology-focused individuals, would pull up the Erickson and the Kohlberg, where where at that age you're seeking to identify. So my friends are also on media, so this is something I want to be a part of.
Yeah, exactly. And then look at the fact that in the economy we are in now, parents are working more. So I did not have enough time to give to their children, so they say, here this phone, go and do something online, and they see it as, oh well, he's entertained, but what is he entertained doing?
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we look at children identifying themselves at a young age, you must be very careful of what you're feeding your children, and I understand that parents are very busy, but still some kind of monitoring online is needed.
Yeah, for sure.
Are we seeing a difference in the genders with this behavior? Is there like a major difference between male and female, boys and girls?
What isn't? It's interesting you should ask that, because what I am really thinking about and concerned about is that we're seeing more males demonstrating that behavior, but really and truly, or the males are fighting, etc. And remember, I stated we're like a microcosm of society. There's supposedly are there female gangs in schools? Are there females fighting in school? Then why is it not playing out in our wider society? Where have the females gone? So I do think that the gender discussion is important, plus the color and race is also important to add to this.
If I may add, when you look online, there's a lot of movements for females. They have a lot of support. And I commend the females for sticking together, but our males lack that support. So where would they seek the support then? In these same gangs or events where they feel involved, they feel as though someone is listening to them. Where females have the Me Too movement, the 4B movements, there are so many movements online for our females. So where do we make the males feel welcomed? To take them away from the community and the drugs and the gangs.
You want to weigh in on this, Dr. Marshall?
No, I had a different view because when they looked at I would get excerpts. When I would say excerpt, I would get videos of what is happening in the schools, and the last 5 videos all involve girls fighting, and fighting ferociously as well. So I don't necessarily agree that there's a divide. I think what is happening in society is impacting both genders. What may happen is that you might have more expressions of it in the wider society, but when you go into the schools, principals will tell you that they have equal concerns regarding males and females. And so the fighting, the behavior, the change of attitudes, it transcends gender. Because it is they're the same basic forces that are impacting society. It is just as they said that when you look at the wider society, you find males are more visible. But when you go into the schools, you will see that we have challenges as well with girls and fighting and as they said, pretty fiercely as well.
Yeah. Which segues very good into my next question. But before I get there, I just want to remind the audience that you can submit your questions and your queries to our YouTube and Facebook page, and we'll be sure to pass them on to our panelists tonight, so you can get a live answer right here on In Focus. My next question is, we've been having a lot of discussion about the grooming policy. So without touching on it too much, I want to know, is the dress code of the young people, could this have an impact on their behavior?
Do you want any of it? Okay, go ahead. Let's start with you.
Let's go with Omari first.
I will start by saying absolutely not. I do not believe it has an impact. Because 2 things are closely linked together does not mean that one thing is the reason for another. And I was in a husking session with children's counselors, and a lady said that hair and clothes do not pull triggers. The grooming policy is a means of integrity. It shows flexibility in the thinking of our stakeholders. It gives the students creativity, and it's present in the future right now. Is where we are, and I believe as we keep evolving, things need to change. The policy changing to have our men also have plaited hair, it does not define who they are in a sense of a violent person. The reason for the grooming policy I see right now is just to give students more identity, more creativity and flexibility over who they are, and then understand that the policy, understand that you're meant to look a certain way in schools. Organization is key, and you should present yourself in a mannerly way, and you should be able to do that while still keeping to your identity and who you are, and the policy allows students to explore those values.
Okay, from a social worker's perspective.
Yeah, I had to dig a little deeper to really understand the grooming policy as relates to the origins. It started because came out of COVID, and now the revision is supposed to be by the end of this year, December 31st, 2025. But in the policy itself, the discussion about hair and deportment is just a part of it. The policy is asking about respect, and it's also asking about a sense of identity. And that's much bigger than the whole hair discussion as we talk about. We also look at the fact that hair tied to deportment isn't just how you dress or how the hair is, it's also how you walk, it's also what you eat, there's so much in it that what we have found and what's being suggested by the social workers is that the grooming policy needs to and should embody, which it does, the other areas as relates to that particular child. I had mentioned Erickson and I mentioned Kohlberg, and we were all teenagers, we were all at school. You know, there's that point where you want to fit in and have friends, and somebody, you know, you see somebody who looks similar to you and you just really want to be part of that. It can be a very lonely situation for a child who basically don't have any friends in the school system. But more importantly, I think that the grooming policy is one that really goes deeper. We cannot just stop, or should not stop, the discussion about here or be misguided as relates to here. We're talking respect. How do we teach respect? And how do we give that sense of identity? And what comes out from there is really, when we think about it, our school reports. Our school reports, there's only one field that talks about deportment. The rest of the school report deals with so many other areas, you know, and it bridges what happens at home with what's happening at school for the child.
Yes, well, again, I have a different view, and I might be old school in this regard, but when you look at the origin of the grooming policy, it was designed to address a situation in which we were placed as a result of COVID. You were unable to access barbers, hair salons, etc., and that was you were accommodated for that reason. So we never really had an issue with the way how children were attired going to school prior to COVID. So if you are telling me that COVID has ended, why are you coming to telling me now that, okay, COVID has ended, let us continue with this approach that was designed to solve a problem because of COVID? The second issue we have with the, not necessarily policy, is that people are not making the connection between your state of mind in terms of deportment, etc. That is all part and parcel of your attitude towards learning. And prior to the grooming policy, part and parcel of what we did in the school was to say, well, okay, we want you to adopt certain behaviors, to look a certain way, because it speaks about your readiness for learning. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Teachers will say to students, don't come to the classroom prepared for the day's work. So during the course of that class, a teacher will say to a student, well, you cannot go to the basket to sharpen your pencils. Now, a person may look at that on the outside and say, well, okay, that can't stop a child from learning. But what the teacher is communicating to that child is that you come prepared for your work, and you come prepared to engage and to be educated. So while grooming does not, as person will say, the way how your hair is styled or whatever will not prevent you from learning, it is the deeper significance and the message you are communicating when you say, well, okay, this is our standard, and this is how we want you to come prepared for your classes, etc. I have no problem with persons expressing themselves as, quote unquote, the African culture, none whatsoever. I have no problem with that. However, I have a problem with it when I go into a school, for example, and I know a person will knock me for this. I went into a school doing a graduation, and the students were dressed in gowns, and they could not even tell who was male and who was female. I could not even tell, and I'm not saying that is necessarily a bad thing. All I'm saying is that we have to look to see what is the real agenda behind the grooming policy. What are we really seeking to do? Because when we start to dismantle our society on the grounds that you are seeking to be more modern, quote unquote, we have to ask ourselves, where are we taking the society? Because we only see the impact down the road. And I know there's a school of thought that has suggested that part and parcel of the grooming policy is really to groom, and not in the sense of grooming literally, but in terms of the legal sense. So we have to look at those things.
Sure, when I see you, I should jump back in, and I know that conversation requires. Okay, so I'm going to take your point before we take a question from the audience.
Oh, where do I begin? I hear his passion, yeah? I hear it. And what concerns me is that we're still focusing on the child, and I want to pull it back to the parent or the home in which this child is coming from. And we need to give parents a better understanding, better guidelines as relates to the grooming policy. And we also need to understand where the parents are also in need of help. So we have situations, yes, there are PTAs, and I think one thing our social workers will say, PTAs can no longer be just parents and teachers associations. We need to add social workers to that. We need to add guidance counselors to that. And we also need to add student councils. So the collaboration must include the student. So as we see, and you walk into a school and persons are all dressed in gowns and looking difficult to identify, it's okay. But remember, behind that student and behind that child is a parent who can be the absentee father, that the mother is no longer allowing that child to have access to. I mean, there's so many discussions, and we will come to it because we did 2 projects. Lyrics, which looked at the co-parenting, and we also have resilient awardees, where children from a lot of vulnerabilities have been successful as relates to their common entrance exam.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to tell our producers that we need to have a separate episode to just discuss the grooming policy, because we have conflict of beliefs right here.
Passion, right?
However,
Passion.
we are going to take a question from the audience. So, does gang culture cause erratic behavior? I'm going to throw that out to the panel.
Does gang
culture cause erratic behavior? I'm going to assume that they mean the children seeing the gangs in their communities, maybe?
What? Gang culture, there's counter culture. There's years ago in terms of, and this is grounding, because I honestly think that we need to ground discussion as relates to theory, as relates to what the science is telling us and where we can go with it. So what they see as gang culture is really, can we see it as teamwork? Can we see it as you're working together towards a particular goal? It may not be a positive goal that we quote or we determine as society as being negative. But if we go back to the school system, then is it that deviant child that seems to have all this energy to do things wrong? Are we trained enough to recognize, okay, this child really needs to be doing something else? We often hear the bad apple spoils the whole bunch. But if you take that bad apple, do you know that that bad apple can make a wonderful apple pie or jam or jelly? So can we do a little bit more? And I can hear
Dr.
him next to me.
He's ready to go.
So go ahead.
I would like to say that does gang culture cause erratic behavior? As you said, look at it as a gang, as in they do bad things to the community, they kill or they steal. But don't forget, this is a young man or a young girl trying to identify or feel included into some things. You have to ask yourself, where or how can I make my child feel more involved at home or like in a sport to take them away from the culture? And yes, it would cause erratic behavior, because whatever they're doing, the child may justify as the right thing to do because they accept them.
Yeah, having that sense of belonging. This is where I am heard. This is where I am,
Dr. Marshall,
supported.
have anything to say
but over to Dr. Marshall.
I was just going to say that when you talk about gang culture, because the persons who are aspiring to be members of a gang, or they hold those persons, those leaders, in high esteem, for them, they're going to follow the dictates of that leader of the gang. So whatever that person says to do, he or she will do. So then in that regard, you can see them trying to use our same expression, trying to fit in. And they fit in by doing what the gang leaders would say. So I can see that supreme influence over the persons who are in that group or who are seeking to be part of that particular group. And you are correct when you said that that gangs operate very strong lines of leadership. Because when you see how gangs are set up and how they are run, those persons are really good leaders. They're leading, but they're leading to their particular end, even though it is a pernicious, and if you want to call it that, but they still have excellent leadership skills. If you can get them to help the gang members to develop their leadership, that would be great. But we know that does not happen. because they have a different motive and intention for being in that gang.
And there also needs to be those who policing or supporting, not necessarily supporting, but those who, the gang culture can only live as far as it can live unless persons who are there to reinforce in terms of monitoring, in terms of making sure and guide and give instructions according to the particular environment.
To add on, I have read on Barbados today that there are hotspots.
Yeah.
There's Black Rock. Well, St. Michael is the hotspot, I would say, because every parish that you label is in St. Michael. I mean, every village you live in St. Michael. That's the hotspot. So if we know this is the hotspot for a lot of gang culture and gang violences, why aren't we trying to at least put more police in these areas, or maybe more resource centers to get these young men more involved? We identify the hotspots. So what we're going to do with the hotspots instead of labeling them as hotspots.
And good question, and I'm tending to think there's some research that has been done. As you remember, you would have had professional definition, and we also have Kim Ramsey that would have done some work, some extensive work as relates to gang and the culture of gangs within specific communities in Barbados. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
And also you have, I suppose you can't look at it in isolation either, because you have to ask yourself, what are the antecedent factors that are giving rise to gangs? And when you think about it, you have to recognize that gangs form or they coalesce around sometimes drugs. Let us be realistic. And sometimes the fueling that you are seeing will invariably come as a result of some person's turf being encroached or vice versa. So you gotta recognize that gangs don't just emerge, you know. Gangs emerge because there's something to be won or lost. What is to be won? Turf. What does turf represent? Finances. In other words, you are encroaching on my capacity to earn a living, quote unquote. And that is where you're getting the emergence of gangs over and over again, because the drug culture is rampant.
Okay, well, I'm going to steer this back to the schools.
Yeah, because I was about to say, imagine a child growing up in an environment where the adult or significant other, I wouldn't just say parent or grandparent, is submerged into that type of culture, or even to the point where they may have been, somebody may have been arrested or somebody may have been killed, and they're growing up in it. So do they come to school with all the grooming necessary when in their minds they're at a different space? So we need to really do the research, do some more.
And that just not crossing, that is a valid point, because even when you look into the schools, when it was in system, there were times when we would have students who would come to school simply to sell drugs. That is the reality. They come to school because that is their market. And you might have 2 or 3 quote-unquote mini gang leaders on the school compound, and they have their turf. And even at the school level, you get violence at schools because, again, you have encroached. So it is right there in the school system, and I left the system about 15 years ago, 17 years. So it is times worse today.
Well, a lot has been said, and we are far from finished this discussion. So keep your comments and questions coming, and we will be right back.
The reason I joined the DEO is because I wanted to make a difference within my community and somewhat give back to this island, Barbados. Disaster management is a passion of mine, one of them, and I think that it is much needed. we look at disasters as hurricanes only, but a disaster is more than a hurricane. You know, we can have natural and man-made hazards which can incur flooding. We can have the hurricanes, yeah, and we can have accidents, oil spills, you name it. Anybody can volunteer, whether you be a first aider, a nurse, retired police, retired fireman, and just want to give back to your community.
When disaster strikes, DEO volunteers are the first help that may arrive in stricken communities. DEO volunteers can be the difference between total catastrophe and simple misfortune. Be the difference in your community. Join the DEO in your area today.
Attention citizens, if you notice any unusual insects or animals on imported fruits, vegetables or plants, do not turn a blind eye. These strange organisms may be invasive species, threats that can wreak havoc on our farms, ecosystems and jeopardize our local food supply. Early detection and swift reporting are our best defenses against the spread of potentially dangerous pests and diseases. Contact the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security at 535-5100. Email to hotline@agriculture.gov.bb or WhatsApp a picture to 832-2445. Protect our agriculture, because a healthy Barbados begins with you.
Think before you click. Pigeons, think before you click. Don't forget now. Before you spread wrong information, think before you click. Just stop and think. Think before you click. BBS. Think before you click. If you can't confirm the source of the information, think before you click. When friends send news to your phone, check the source or leave it alone. Cause people creating fake news to deceive you and confuse. Alright now, accident broadcast on WhatsApp. Check yourself, don't forward that. Have respect for the victim's family. You would not share family like that. Think before you click. Pigeons, think before you click. Don't forget now. Before you spread wrong information, think before you click. Just stop and think. Think before you click. Think before you click. If you can't confirm the source of the information, think before you click.
Just a Conversation, the podcast where we discuss the topics that matter to you.
From real stories to real talk, we dive into everything. No filters, no fluff.
We're talking about the issues you actually care about. Finance, mental health, sports, entertainment, and so much more.
It's not just talk. It's conversations that bring us together, challenge us, and keep it real.
Don't have time to watch? No problem.
Just turn on the video while you're cooking and we'll keep you company.
Listen on your morning commute, while you work out at the gym, or even when you get home on evenings and chilling out.
Wherever you are, however you listen, this is your space for real conversations.
Join us.
Join us.
Just a Conversation.
Available on all streaming platforms or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at GIS Barbados to share your thoughts or to stay connected.
Welcome back. Collaboration, communication, conversation, and community efforts all are important in this conversation about breaking the cycle. We have one question from the audience. This is from Tyralicia, and I'm going to throw this out to the entire panel. What are your thoughts about corporal punishment in schools or the absence of it? And do you does it decrease? Do you think that the decrease of corporal punishment in schools is linked to the indiscipline?
I think that, Sarah, go first. I think that corporal punishment itself can lead to indiscipline, because when you are struck with a principal and he beat you, lashes wear off, but the words and the statements you make towards someone's characters stays longer. So different methods of punishment can be used that can be used as like restorative punishment, as in, I'm punishing you, yes, but in this punishment you are getting something out of it that will build on your character. Because when it just hit you until you go about your business, lashes done, you done feel the pain, and the same thing again, gone back, same thing, I come once and get beat. Lashes don't really do nothing to me at this point. But if you sit me in a room with my parents and you talk about what I've done or who I've hurt, and you tell me the pain that I've caused and the pain people around me, that will hit me deeper than just beating me. So restorative punishment can be something that we could use.
I'm with you, Omar. I am definitely with you 100% in terms of zero punishment, corporal punishment, 0 lashes as relates to children, but having a conversation between, as you said, the conversation with the person in which I have broken the school rules towards and their parents, and likewise, I think it's important to engage the other persons, those who stood around and decide, well, they enjoy this fight so much, every evening I can report to my parent about a fight. They're the audience, but they're the ones that maybe the next term may be fighting. So for me, and as a number of social workers will say, the corporal punishment had its time. At this particular juncture, we will say no. Let's talk it out, and let's talk it out with the right set of people, not just talk it out and leave it there, but you're talking it out and knowing what the other side of all of this would happen. Let's add to that too, as relates to, you get the lashes, you walk away from the lashes, and then what?
How many times can you beat this person?
Yes, and there's a point where you become so comforted by the lashes, you know, ... if I do this, I will be lashed. Yeah, if I do, and there's that comfort that comes with the punishment.
My father would agree with you. His punishment was more, encouraged me to think I was going to an event, plan for it with my friends, and then at the very last minute said no. And honestly, the embarrassment from that lasted way longer than the lashes. But I can see that Dr. Marshall has a difference of opinion here.
And he waited, he knew this question was coming, and yes, go ahead.
All right, thank you. And as you quite rightly said, you have a difference of opinion. I actually did some research on the effectiveness of corporal and non-corporal punishment in schools years ago. And what the research showed was that corporal punishment has its place, non-corporal punishment also has its place. The situations that have been described are situations where you're talking about extreme situations. But the reality is this, we use corporal punishment for years and it worked for us, even though persons will say they disagree. We switched to child-friendly when they will get, and that worked for a while, but the reality is this, any method of reward and sanction will only work for a time. Your real goal is to get a student or get a person to be engaged in self-discipline. But in the initial stages, you may have to do external stimuli to be able to get that person where you want him or her to be. Because I don't believe, and I have 3 children. And I would be straightforward. I used to flog my children. I'm not going to hide it. But the point is, I only had to flog them, let us say, up to the age, or not even flog, because they once or twice. But for the most part, by the time they were 5, they understood what time of day it was. They understood that martial law was in place in the house. I mean, martial law. So therefore, it did what it was supposed to do, and they understood that, okay, these are behaviors that will be tolerated, and these will not be. So you can use rewards or you can use sanctions. There's something called the novelty effect. And when, even when they were giving the rewards, one student came to school one day and shared out pencils to everybody when they were giving pencils for good behavior. In Belgian parlance, done them. So the program was dismissed because of that. Because no matter, when you start to give rewards, you have to keep increasing those rewards over and over again. It's like courting a young lady. You don't want to carry her to the Ritz-Carlton on the first date because you're in trouble. Because you can't better that after that first date. So you start with a lead pipe and a drink at the shop, and then you graduate and you graduate. Because again, when you start to give rewards, expectations increase. And when you give a person, let us say even a tablet, tablets are what, $100? And persons travel all over the place, so therefore that type of reward doesn't really work.
We have a question first for Dr. Marshall.
Yes.
This is from Joy. Dr. Marshall, do you think that the young man sitting next to you has difficulty learning because of his hairstyle?
As I said before, I have no issue with persons styling their hair as they see fit. My position was there are systems and modes of behavior, especially within the context of a school, and I want to maintain that. The young man sitting next to me is an adult. When you're talking about children, children are impressionable, and you cannot say to me that a child whose brain has not even fully developed at that point in time is able to make informed decisions. The parents have to take on that responsibility. So I don't have a problem with any adult styling his or her hair as he sees fit. But I am saying that, so if we are saying it was stopping them from learning, my point was you are creating a space and an environment that says this is a place of serious business, we are disciplined here, and this is what we are going to do.
There was a time where we would say that this was practice for the workplace, but in the workplace now, it's acceptable to wear certain hairstyles for men. Okay. So what would be the basis?
And what you just mentioned, because the grooming policy is not just for the school, you have grooming policy as relates to workplaces. And really and truly, as my neighbor was saying and sharing, I'm reminded of the fact that really and truly, it is different views will hold as relates to the situation. As a daddy, he was able to beat his children, the martial law, and pulling us back there. I've never hit any of my children. And at this stage, simply because for me as a child, I was never hit. And not only that, in terms of domestic violence, when you think of hitting and beating and slapping, and that's a whole nother conversation, but imagine a child coming up in that environment where you're seeing your parent, either parent, being hurt or harmed by someone else, another adult, and then at school, then the same hit or slap or whatever is also meted out to you. What is it we are saying to that child?
In psychology, we learn biological and environmental factors that influence development. And I believe environmental factors influence the most. Because you as the parent, when you set an example, this is how you deal with violence or you deal with aggression by retaliating through beating. It may work for a time, but after that, child may begin to resent you. And you would not want that in your household. If you raise a child in a way they don't resent you, then kudos to you, great job as a parent. But it's not going to work for everyone. So if you teach the child that when I am angry or someone does something wrong to me, I must retaliate and hit them, you're contributing to violence in the society.
But notice I did not say that. I said I use corporal punishment as a means of discipline. I also made the point that there comes a time when you don't have to use it at all because it no longer is necessary. I am not saying, and we keep equating beating and abuse with corporal punishment. Corporal punishment, abuse, those are two different things, and we have to separate them. We have to separate those two things. Don't conflate the issue. So as I said, I could even count on one hand the number of times I punish my children, and they're what, 21, 18, and 15. But I'm saying that it's not that you are punishing them even when you're angry. You sit down and say, well, okay, these are the consequences that you are suffering because you did X or Y. So within schools, to take it back to the question asked, when we remove corporal punishment, not remove, because on the law books, corporal punishment is still legal. But what we did is that we created an environment where principals and teachers are so reluctant to use corporal punishment now because they're suggesting use all these other methods, and all the other methods are not working. That is the problem.
Can we test it? Can we test it?
It has been tested.
Before we get too deep into that again, because I know you're not going to stop.
Correct.
I want to take another question from our audience. This is our last question from the audience, and you can still keep the questions coming, and we can also forward them to our panelists, and we can send you the information at a later time, or we can post it to the GIS social media pages. Okay, so the issue is, if the child does not understand that the establishment has rules and regulations, they will take that attitude into the workplace and into the real world. Comments?
Correct. That is absolutely right. Every workplace has its set of rules and regulations. You may say, back then they're talking about we shouldn't have deportment, etc. rules for that, but every workplace has its set of rules and regulations. And because you want to be employed, guess what you do? You conform. There's not an issue. And I remember there was one establishment, even though there's the legislation that speaks about discrimination in the workplace and so on, there was an establishment that was able to get people to come to work dressed in what you would call long sleeve shirt and pants and looking decent just because they wanted the job. So that is the reality. Every place has its rules and regulations, and we are teaching our students that you have to live within the confines of rules and regulations, because even though you have rights, your rights cannot infringe on the other party's right.
The government policy also has rules and regulations. Yes, they are flexible, but the rules state specifically that the hair must be in this way. You must wear the bob earrings. You must have your shirt at a certain length, and you must still wear the school uniform. There are still rules and regulations. If you're applying for a job and the job states you must cut all your hair off, apply for the next job.
Yeah, go where you
go where you feel comfortable or where you feel wanted. That
Mm-hmm.
job may work for me if I like to keep my hair low, but it might not work for somebody else. It does not mean that I have to conform to this organization's rules, because I'm entitled to my own opinion. And I feel the government policy gives children the opportunity to express themselves while still conforming to organizational rules and regulations. Because at the same time, our businesses do push for that, for employees to make their remarks, tell you how you feel, add your feedback and criticisms, and that is what is implemented in students, the ability to speak out. Because the government policy even states that you can still come back and make recommendations. It's not linear at all. Okay. So I do believe that the rules and regulations do not misguide students from not following organizational rules or anything of that nature.
Right, and just to add on to that, because once you're in the workplace, if there is a breach of the rules, then there is a way in which it will be dealt with in the workplace. So likewise, if we have this particular policy, I'm sure we've heard that other persons have been asking really for more specific guidelines. What is being asked for us within the policy? And as I have kept on saying, the child is not standing alone. This is a child, this is a primary school child, a secondary school child, who is attached to a parent. Find out what is happening in that home environment, what is happening to that child in the community. I mean, you may have a child in terms of deportment and dress, and when you check his bag, it's a shoebox. Nothing else but a shoebox. So what am I saying to my community? What am I saying to my family? Okay, so
we're
basically
running out of time now.
Already?
Already, yes. It's been a very heated and interesting conversation, but we can field one more question, and then we're going to ask you to give your final thoughts.
Sure.
This one is from John. Do you think we focus too much on academic skills rather than life skills?
I believe the course HFLE needs to be redefined.
Can you tell me what HFLE is? You know, I've been in school for a long time.
Family life education. Is education?
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Growing up, well, I'm not growing up, wait, I'm still young. Coming through secondary school, a lot of my peers would skip HFLE. because they saw it as not like a real class. It didn't add value to their curriculum. Now when I search the HFID curriculum, it teaches you critical thinking, problem solving, emotional understanding, everything that our young men need right now. So why isn't it at the forefront of the system? And I believe that like HFID has all the life skills this company is asking for, or could be hinting at. It needs to be put at the forefront of education.
So give us your final thoughts before we move on.
My final thought is this. I believe that there needs to be more counseling in secondary school. Our young men and young women, one guidance counselor is not enough. I don't understand resources, and you can't just like spawn in a guidance counselor. But look at where we are right now at university. We are giving birth to future scholars, future psychologists, and in psychology you need experience. You have to give back programs. Can we utilize our youth to help our youth? Something called peer counseling. You can bring these psychological students who want to study in guidance counseling and give them first-hand experience in these schools to assist the counselors. And you never know, they might even come back and stay. And when they make their own firm in psychology, that student can even go back to them. At the end of the day, our students need somebody to talk to. And someone around the same age group would also be beneficial.
Okay.
That's my final thought, peer counseling.
Sharon?
Yes, and the one person that I can see complementing the guidance counselor, and that has happened since 2022, yes, with the school social worker. Because as you said, the guidance counselor alone can't handle the situations within the school. So you have the school counselor, you have the social worker outside the school system, where you are looking at the home environment and what's taking place there. As I give my final thoughts, I really want to give, as it relates to solutions, food for thought for our audience. One, to look beyond the deviance, look beyond the fruit that we say is deviant. Look to the root, look to the stem, look to, and see it as not necessarily just negative, but also positive. I had mentioned about the PTAs, to add the S that relates to students and social workers and student councils at every year group, every level. And for us, take away suspensions. No more suspensions within the school. Once you're in school and you have basically broke a rule or something, let's do something, let's work with you, let's push it as well. The psychosocial assessment, when we go in and move from primary school to secondary school, am I just coming in with my result? Can we do an assessment there? See what's happening to this child. Can I look at your report coming in from primary school on to secondary school? And add to that, we have school attendance officers in the ministry. We need more as relates to our social workers. So I'm not just looking at a school report that says deportment. I'm also looking at your lateness. I'm also looking at your absenteeism. I'm also seeing and grounding it in research as it relates to those things. We talked about gang violence. We also have persons who have been, young people who've been in prison. What can we learn from them? We have young persons who have died. We have young persons who are perpetrators. What are they telling us? There is a field of research out there that we can just jump into.
Thank you. Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. I have so many other things to add. I mean, this program is just not long
We need
enough.
a part two.
Yes. So my thing is this. I agree with the comment about having psychologists in schools. We have been asking for years to have more psychologists in schools. I think we have two at the Ministry of Education, but we need to have more psychologists, need to have more social workers, need to have more counselors placed within not only primary schools, secondary schools, but also primary schools, because the problems start there. And the other thing we need to do as well is to recognize that we have created for ourselves a serious problem by moving towards this idea of alternative forms of discipline. And in other words, we have thrown out the baby with the bathwater. And people don't even begin to understand what really happens in schools, you know. I work in a very, very difficult school, and the schools have become increasingly difficult today. So people on the outside don't understand what happens in schools. You have a teacher who has to take care of 30 students, and we have to address the issue of teacher burnout. We have to look at workplace health and wellness for teachers. Okay. So you take away all the power from teachers, all the power from principals. Don't flog, don't suspend, don't expel. What are they supposed to do in the school system? How are they supposed to deal with 30 students who are giving problems? And the reality is this: one principal alone cannot do it. And we are saddling the principals with so many responsibilities that they spend the majority of their time dealing with disciplinary issues rather than instructional leadership. These are the real issues out there. And then they go right back into the society. So I don't know if we are really serious about what needs to be done in schools.
I know you are.
Just to say that the school does not have to do it alone. The school does not have to do it alone. The principals don't have to do it alone. The school is part of the community. The school, there is church. Yeah, there is, there are families, there are other entities in that community along with the school.
Wow. This was definitely insightful and thought-provoking. I can see part 2, part 3 coming from this, but I'm sure that the conversation will continue. Part 12, he says. I'm sure the conversation can continue even outside of this setting. We would encourage other persons to also join the conversation. So it has reminded me though, and I'm sure many of you agree, that addressing behavioral issues in our youth isn't just about discipline. It's about understanding, collaboration, commitment from all corners of the community. So thank you all so much for your time today. And thank you, our audience, for joining us and engaging in this important dialogue. Let's keep the conversation going, because creating safe, supportive schools and communities is a responsibility we must all share. Stay informed, stay involved, and let's work together for positive change. I am Sharifa Medford-Gilkes. Goodbye.